Welcome to the deep dive. We are diving deep into the source material shared with us, really trying to analyze the patterns, the patterns of success and failure, influence, control, all that stuff across centuries of commerce.
Hmm.
Today, we are setting the stage for, let's say, a forensic examination, looking at the strategies, the sheer, unrelenting competitive drive, and maybe the personalities needed to build these, well, colossal world-shifting fortunes and brands.
Right.
Our core question today is really structural. How does power truly concentrate in the hands of so few, and what are the tactics they keep using, the ones that endure?
That is precisely our mission today. We are synthesizing insights from sources that, they span from the 19th century. You've got the steel barons, the railroad kings who built the foundations of modern industry,
Yeah, the big names.
all the way up to the current moment. We're looking at private equity titans, tech innovators, even architects of AI theory.
Oh.
And we're hunting for those underlying mechanics, the things individuals use, whether they're in finance, tech, media, whatever, to get that unparalleled dominance. We're focusing specifically on tactics of control, financial manipulation, and importantly, how they leverage their personal identity.
Okay, let's unpack this then and maybe jump straight into those foundational figures. When you look at the old guard people like Rockefeller, Carnegie, Vanderbilt, you quickly realize their success was fundamentally rooted in this intense, almost obsessive, sometimes almost religious pursuit of absolute operational control.
Obsession is definitely the right word.
Mhm.
And maybe no one embodies it more than John D. Rockefeller. He got market control through just relentless competition, sure, but his personal drive, that was all about internal rigor.
How so?
Well, the sources describe him as, and I'm quoting here, methodical to an extreme, careful as to details and exacting to a fraction.
Oh.
He wasn't just looking at the big picture balance sheet. He was obsessed with the minute-by-minute execution of his grand strategy. Every little detail mattered.
And what's really fascinating here is that methodical approach. It wasn't just limited to business operations, right?
Yeah.
It went into his own, spiritual and psychological management.
Exactly.
He was constantly grappling with the sheer power and wealth he was building up, almost seeing it as a spiritual danger.
Hmm.
We have accounts of him having these, intimate conversations with himself, like nightly sermons, basically,
Yeah.
warning himself, are you going to let this money puff you up? Keep your eyes open. Don't lose your balance. It sounds like this incredibly effective form of self-management, a way to stay disciplined against all that prosperity.
But then how did the sources square that piety, that internal struggle with the actual tactics, the predatory pricing, the crushing rivals?
Yes. This is where the synthesis of morality and business gets really, really interesting and maybe a bit uncomfortable.
Go on.
Rockefeller basically elevated his aggressive tactics into a kind of religious imperative. He saw the early oil business as just chaos, a squalid mess plagued by what he called ruinous competition.
Okay, so that's the justification.
That's the key rationalization, yeah. For him, creating this huge cartel Standard Oil, that was the only way to bring order and efficiency.
So he wasn't just a businessman, he was a savior.
In his own narrative, yes. The sources confirm he viewed Standard Oil as, quote, the moral equivalent of the Baptist Church. He literally turned his business career into a kind of Christian saga,
Wow.
arguing that by consolidating the industry, he was actually rescuing refiners from this ruinous, sinful competition.
Okay.
And that gave him the ultimate internal justification, you see. To use these brutal monopolistic tactics, he wasn't just maximizing profits, he felt he was saving the industry's soul.
That ability to justify immense ruthlessness through some kind of higher mission, that's a pattern we see again and again, isn't
Yeah,
it?
absolutely.
So if Rockefeller sought control through this methodical rationalization and spiritual discipline, Cornelius Vanderbilt, the Commodore,
Yeah.
he seemed to seek control through something much rawer, like personal vendetta.
Yes. And he weaponized the modern corporation to do it.
That's a fascinating angle.
He didn't just use capital to build things. The sources say he used the corporate structure itself as a, quote, weapon for revenge.
A weapon. Okay.
There's this detailed story where he felt he'd been deceived by an associate, a guy named White, instead of just, suing him.
Right.
Vanderbilt launched an assault designed purely to inflict maximum personal financial pain.
How did you do that?
Well, White's wealth was mostly tied up in shares of the accessory transit company. So Vanderbilt, using his market control and financial muscle, just launched this full-scale attack on those shares.
Manipulating the market.
Totally. Eventually declaring the stock worthless as long as his enemy, White, stayed in the company. He wasn't trying to make a fair deal. He was using his market power to declare ruin on this one guy.
It's the ultimate demonstration, isn't it? How, at that level, the company stops being just a business vehicle and becomes this instrument for intensely personal destruction.
Yeah. He basically shorted his rival into complete financial oblivion. It shows this deep kind of predatory understanding of market leverage.
And that ruthlessness, it wasn't just personal vendettas, was it? It went right into the structure of labor itself. If we shift to Andrew Carnegie.
Ah, Carnegie. Yeah. We see how controlling workers and costs translated directly into just exponential, unbelievable profit growth.
The sources really confirm this, and it's a brutal correlation. Carnegie actually bragged to Henry Clay Frick. He said they had, quote, reached the secret of money-making in iron and steel manufacture.
And when did he say that?
Right around the time union organizers were successfully and violently kicked out of his main mills, places like Homestead and Duquesne.
So the foundation for that incredible growth was basically laid by maximizing output, cutting wages, increasing hours, and just eliminating organized labor's power to negotiate.
Pretty much.
The sources show the impact so clearly. After those changes, the organization apparently never felt more perfect, and the profits just soared.
Yeah.
But it wasn't only about raw wage cuts, was it? It was also the calculated manipulation of how employees were paid.
Tell me more.
Well, when profits inevitably boomed, some execs suggested maybe raising actual wage rates back up. Carnegie offered a much more cynical but strategically brilliant alternative.
Which was?
He advised against making high wages permanent. Instead, he said, offer a bonus.
The bonus. Temporary.
Exactly, the advantage. A bonus could be, quote, rescinded whenever the company decided it necessary. It wasn't a real reward. It was this impermanent psychological lever designed to motivate effort short-term without locking in long-term labor costs.
Clever. And ruthless.
And he even had a plan for the quietest, most effective way to get rid of that bonus when he didn't need it anymore.
Really?
Yeah, he detailed advising his executives, rescind it when the mills stop for maintenance or repairs. His advice was just chillingly calculated. He suggested quietly telling the men the firm regretted it couldn't keep paying the bonus right now.
And his assumption.
Built entirely on his leverage over a non-unionized workforce. It was simple. The men will agree to start without the bonus. If not, you can wait.
Just wait them out. Wow. It's pure, perfect leverage, isn't it? The workers would rather have the mill running, even without the bonus, than risk losing their jobs entirely while the company just waits.
It really illustrates that the core mechanics of dominance back then in the 19th century, they were built on this intense, personalized, often physical control. Control over materials, supply chains, and maybe most critically, the labor force.
That's a great summary. The old guard controlled the physical world. The steel, the rails, the oil, the people.
Right. So shifting gears now. The mechanics of power today seem to have moved, or at least evolved, from controlling physical production to mastering, well, financial architecture. The modern titans, they still seem to want the same concentration of wealth, but their tools are often more abstract. Mathematics, financial engineering, which can be just as ruthless as busting a union, maybe even more insidious. #tech2. The financial architecture of modern power.
Yeah, this transition leads us straight into the structural analysis of modern inequality, specifically Thomas Piketty's big idea, that fundamental equation, the Dorgy-Way rule.
Right, $3 is greater than $2.
What's fascinating here is that this dynamic, it doesn't necessarily require any individual genius or even specific market manipulation. It's described as a deep, persistent structural mechanism that just automatically concentrates wealth.
Okay, let's break that down, because it's really core to understanding inequality today, isn't it?
Absolutely. The equation basically says, when the rate of return on capital, that's profit, dividends, interest, rent, etc., when that rate distinctly and persistently exceeds the rate of growth of the overall economy, meaning output and income.
So when money invested makes money faster than the economy itself is growing?
Exactly. When that happens, it automatically generates, as Piketty puts it, arbitrary and unsustainable inequalities.
Let's try and really internalize this, maybe with an example, because it feels like the engine of modern power accumulation.
Good idea. So imagine the general economic growth of the country, the overall increase in wages, GDP, output. That's $2. Let's say it's growing at, 1% per year. Pretty slow, maybe.
Okay, 1% growth for the economy.
Now imagine that a big, diversified portfolio of capital assets, stocks, real estate, bonds, whatever wealthy people own, generates an average return, $3 of 5% per year.
Okay, so 1% growth for average income, 5% growth for existing wealth.
Right. The average worker's income is inching up at 1%, but the capital owner's assets are compounding at 5%. The gap is already huge, right?
Yeah.
But here's the kicker. The low reinvestment threshold makes it even worse.
What do you mean?
If the capital owner's return is 5% and the whole economy is only growing at 1%, that wealthy person only needs to reinvest 1/5, just 20% of their annual capital income.
Only 20%.
Just to make sure their capital still grows faster than the average income of everyone else.
So they can spend the other 80% of their investment income.
Exactly. They can spend 80% of it on whatever they want, yachts, mansions, philanthropy, whatever. And their pile of wealth still pulls away from the economic median indefinitely.
It becomes this sort of wealth multiplier that just runs on its own, almost autonomously.
Precisely. It ensures that inherited wealth, or just existing capital, naturally grows faster than income earned from labor. It creates this indefinite, inegalitarian spiral where the rewards for just owning capital become arbitrary and exponential, simply because the structure of the economy favors capital accumulation over production or labor.
Which helps explain why modern power isn't just about building railroads anymore, but about mastering the structure of finance itself.
Absolutely. Which brings us neatly to the rise of corporate control through things like leveraged buyouts, LBOs.
Right. Michael Milken, the so-called junk bond king.
He recognized this shift, didn't he? Earlier, and maybe more acutely than almost anyone. He saw that the really big money, the most lucrative opportunities, they weren't necessarily in financing organic growth anymore.
No, what were they in?
They were in the struggle for corporate control.
Yeah.
And that struggle really centered on the leveraged buyout, the LBO.
Okay, remind us what an LBO is exactly.
It's where a public company is taken private, often using high-yield, risky junk bonds to finance the purchase. And here's the key. Leveraging the purchase company's own assets and its future cash flow to pay off the debt used to buy it.
So you're using the company's own money, essentially, to buy the company.
In a nutshell, yeah. Control, not just profit generation through operations, became the ultimate prize.
The RJR Nabisco case from the 80s, that's like the textbook example, right? It shows how this new financial maneuvering just completely overshadowed the old focus on organic growth.
Totally. You had the management team at RJR, led by Ross Johnson. They were apparently focused on using these huge cash flows they were getting from selling off parts of the business just to pay down existing bank debt.
So not reinvesting, not building.
No. They weren't interested in building or strategic management, according to the sources. They were just playing the debt reduction game. Investment bankers were apparently constantly bugging Johnson, like, buy something, put your imprint on the company. But he preferred the safety of the status quo.
And that inertia, that lack of vision maybe, created an opening.
Exactly. An opening for pure financial extraction.
And that's when things got crazy, right? The sources describe that moment when KKR, Kohlberg Kravis Roberts, put in this just insane $90 per share bid.
Yeah. And suddenly, the battle for control, the LBO, became the story. It demonstrated that financial engineering, the art of leveraging and controlling ownership structure, was fundamentally more valuable, or at least more dramatic, than long-term strategy or operational efficiency. The company itself almost became secondary.
The asset was just a vehicle for debt and extracting profit.
Precisely. And this tactic, using financial leverage, it didn't vanish after the big financial crises, did it? It just evolved.
How so? Look at the private equity giants like Blackstone, maybe after the 2008 crash.
Good example. After the financial roof basically caved in, their stock plummeted, right? Dipped over 90% in 2009. It was a forbidding landscape. Debt was scarce. They had to innovate their extraction methods.
So how did they adapt? How do you pull cash out when credit markets are frozen or shaky?
They turned to a particularly aggressive tactic. It's called dividend recapitalization, or a dividend recap.
Dividend recap. Okay, what's that?
It involves taking a company they already owned, one in their portfolio, and leveraging it up even further, piling on more debt, even if it already had a lot to do.
Why?
To pay an immediate cash dividend directly to themselves, the private equity owners.
Wow. Okay, let me get this straight. It's like taking out a second mortgage on a house you just bought with a big mortgage.
Yeah.
Not to fix a roof or renovate the kitchen,
Weird.
but just to pay yourself a massive immediate cash bonus and sticking the new debt onto the house itself.
That's a pretty good analogy. The technique was made possible again once credit markets started to thaw, but also, crucially, by improvements in the acquired company's own internal cash flow. Maybe they'd cut costs or improved efficiency somewhat.
So if the company's cash flow is improved by, say, 20%,
They could borrow an additional amount based on that improvement, maybe another 20%, and just pay it straight out to the firm as a dividend.
It's a mechanism for incredibly rapid profit-taking then.
Absolutely. It shows intense control over the company's financial structure, and it prioritizes the private equity firm's immediate gain over the company's long-term financial health or flexibility.
And the company itself is left carrying all that extra debt burden while the owners have already pocketed their profits.
Exactly. The old guard controlled the factory floor.
And the modern titans control the balance sheet.
It's a direct analog, really. The 19th century tycoon cuts labor costs to boost profit margins. The 21st century financier layers on debt to extract cash flow. The result is the same. Intense profit concentration via structural control.
Okay, so now let's transition from these structural finance architects to the modern tech titans. These figures, they often promise to disrupt the old ways with innovation, right? But their core strategies for dominance, do they rely on the same fundamental control mechanisms, just applied differently maybe to digital platforms, data, user experience?
I think they do. That competitive drive, it's immediate and palpable when you look at someone like Bill Gates. The sources are really clear. Gates operated by this almost zero-sum rule. We would never lose the deal.
Never lose the deal.
Yeah. And he viewed competition in a way that, financially, it costs you double if you lost a contract.
How's that? Double.
Well, think about it. You don't get the money from the contract you lost. That's loss number one.
Yeah.
And your competitor gets that money. Loss number two, because they then use it to gain market share, hire engineers, and further challenge you down the road.
Right. It's an exponential loss, potentially. That zero-sum thinking, it must have fueled Microsoft's massive, aggressive expansion, aiming for total platform dominance.
And that aggression, it wasn't just in sales. It extended to market signaling, even when the product wasn't really there yet.
Vaporware.
Pretty much. We see Gates using these hardball tactics through preemptive messaging. Very early on, he promised the press that Microsoft would ship its graphical user interface product, it's called Interface Manager then, before a key competitor, VisiCorp.
But it wasn't ready.
Not even close. This pronouncement was apparently made weeks before they even had a functional prototype.
Wow, that's bold.
It was. And that action, yeah, it would later embarrass the company because of delays, but strategically, it was kind of a masterstroke. It established Microsoft's direction, it forced competitors to react to something that didn't exist yet, and it began that process of controlling the whole platform narrative.
And that desire for platform control, that led directly to conflict, didn't it? Like the famous spat with Apple over the graphical interface.
Oh, yeah. Steve Jobs complained bitterly, didn't he? That Gates and Microsoft just ripped us off completely.
Yeah.
Referring to the graphical interface tech pioneered at Apple, or maybe Xerox PIRE originally, but popularized by Apple.
And Gates's response was pretty classic, wasn't it? Dismissive.
Totally. He suggested Jobs had, quote, really has entered into one of his own reality distortion fields.
Ah, the reality distortion field.
But regardless of who invented what technically, the whole episode just illustrates that establishing the industry standard, whether through original innovation or, maybe more often, through aggressive market positioning and iteration, that's central to dominance. Gates understood. Control the operating system. You control the whole ecosystem. You extract rent from every transaction.
And this need for total control over the ecosystem, it runs deep in the modern focus on user experience too, right? If Gates fought for the OS, maybe Mark Zuckerberg fought for the network itself.
That's a good way to put it. Facebook's strategy for hegemony, it was built on what the forces call a steely willingness to confront competition right from the very beginning.
He wasn't afraid to go head-to-head, was he? He didn't just expand into empty spaces online.
No, not at all. The sources show he specifically targeted universities that already had existing popular internal social networks. Places like Columbia, Stanford, Yale.
Why do that? Seems harder.
He used them as a market test.
Yeah.
His thinking was, if the Facebook could displace those established networks, the one people were already using and liked,
then it could succeed anywhere.
Exactly. It was a strategic, high-stakes confrontation for that digital territory, taking on the incumbents directly.
And his priorities then were, what, making money?
Not at first,
Yeah.
not primarily. Here's apparently unequivocal. Growth and continued improvement in the customer experience were more important than monetization.
Growth first, money later.
Yeah. Initially, he saw advertising as just a necessary evil, something to, quote, pay the bills. This long-term focus on network effects, getting everyone locked in. It meant that when monetization finally did arrive in force,
The platform was indispensable.
right, generating those exponential concentrated financial rewards because everyone was already there.
Okay, let's contrast that maybe with Amazon. Jeff Bezos. He fostered this notoriously confrontational internal culture, right?
Extremely. He fundamentally believed that truth, the best ideas, they spring forth when ideas and perspectives are banged against each other, sometimes violently. That was his philosophy.
Sounds intense. But beneath that aggressive internal dynamic, he had this absolutely obsessive commitment to one external thing.
Customer trust.
Exactly, customer trust.
And that external commitment, interestingly, could actually override profitability, at least in the short term, which seems rare for these kinds of figures.
There's that anecdote, right, where Bezos was willing to just kill off a profitable part of his business.
Yeah, the source mentioned embarrassing email sales of things like personal lubricants. Apparently it was bringing in decent revenue, but he felt it was kind of tawdry, potentially damaging to the brand image he wanted.
So he just shut it down.
Pulled the plug, drew a hard line emphasizing that, quote, no amount of revenue was worth jeopardizing customer trust.
It confirms that philosophy, the customer bond, was the ultimate asset, non-negotiable, because that was the source of his long-term market power, his potential monopoly.
However, let's be clear. The pursuit of dominance also involved fighting tooth and nail to maintain competitive cost advantages, even really controversial ones.
Like the sales tax issue.
Exactly. Bezos fought relentlessly against collecting state sales tax for years, because structurally, that exemption was a massive price advantage for his customers compared to traditional brick-and-mortar stores who had to charge it.
And we know it mattered because when New York finally passed its internet sales tax law,
Amazon sales in New York State dropped significantly,
mm-hmm.
like 10% in the following quarter.
Wow, 10%. That's huge.
It is. And that massive impact, in his view, justified this intense, often ruthless resistance to collecting state taxes.
And to show just how hard-nosed they were about it when states tried to pass these laws, Amazon did something pretty aggressive, didn't they? Kind of borrowed from the Vanderbilt playbook.
They did. They used their corporate structure as a weapon. They just severed ties with their affiliates. These are small, independent websites and entrepreneurs who earned commissions linking to Amazon in any state that passed such a law.
So they basically weaponized those small businesses against their own state governments.
Pretty much. Leveraging them to pressure state legislatures. It demonstrates this intense top-down control over costs, often at the expense of others in the ecosystem.
So whether it's the old guard controlling the price of steel by crushing unions, or the modern titans controlling the price of delivery through tax avoidance, the objective seems pretty similar. Eliminate or externalize costs to secure that exponential advantage.
The tools change, the goal remains remarkably consistent. #Tag5e, the persona and the propaganda machine.
Okay, so we've covered operational control, financial architecture, platform dominance. What's the final piece? Especially in today's media-saturated world, it feels like the persona, the public image, is crucial.
Absolutely. The final crucial piece of this dominance puzzle is the meticulous construction of a public identity. These powerful individuals, they aren't just CEOs or founders. They become these reality-shaping personas, engineered sometimes to project genius, sometimes to inspire loyalty, and sometimes to mask shocking ethical or financial problems.
Let's start with maybe the archetypal creative genius of our time, Elon Musk. His success, his controversies, they seem inseparable from what the sources call his reality-distorting willfulness.
Yeah, that phrase captures it well. This incredible steely resolve allows him to make these astronomical promises, often timeline-bending promises.
What's full self-driving?
Exactly. Promises that nonetheless shape market expectation and investor behavior today. He confidently promises that FSD will revolutionize the world, and crucially for the stock price, that the robotaxi network will make Tesla a 10 trillion company.
Whether they happen on time or exactly as promised seems almost secondary to the impact of the promise itself.
Right. These future commitments fundamentally define the company's valuation now. His public image is that of this mad visionary who can solve impossible problems through sheer force of will.
And his companies seem to embody that persona too, right? That audacious problem solving. There's that anecdote about SpaceX.
It's like Valve.
Yeah. The risky, totally unconventional solution the SpaceX team came up with to, quote, burp open a stuck engine valve on the Dragon capsule during a critical mission.
What do they do again?
They decided to rapidly build up pressure in front of the valve and then suddenly release it, just pop it open.
Wow, yeah.
This willingness to embrace really radical, almost terrifying solutions, it reflects that unconventional high-stakes management style his persona embodies. It feeds the legend.
But not all dominance is built on that kind of future-bending genius persona, is it? Sometimes it's about crafting the opposite image, like the homely, dependable, common man success story.
You mean like Henry Ford, early 20th century?
Exactly. Ford recognized really early on that just being successful wasn't enough. He needed to, in his words, make a sensation.
Make a sensation? How?
He understood that if he could cultivate the right public image, people would, quote, do your advertising for you and do it for nothing.
Free marketing through persona.
Precisely. He meticulously cultivated this image of a homespun hero, someone who'd gotten rich without being spoiled by luxury. He was framed as this genuine man of the people, a mechanic who kept his humility despite his fortune, someone with, quote, exalted faith in the everyday person.
And that persona was relentlessly pushed, wasn't it?
Oh, constantly. Company advertising, publicity. It wasn't just designed to sell the Model T, it was designed to sell the image of this unpretentious genius who believed in democratic access to his product. He leveraged that public trust to gain just unchallenged cultural and industrial dominance for a time.
Okay, fast forward to the modern media age. Oprah Winfrey seems to have perfected this technique of brand extension and cultural synchronization.
Absolutely. Her star-making path, the sources say, involved this perfect convergence. She had her Oscar nomination around the same time her talk show went into syndication.
Right.
And her team mounted what the sources describe as an unprecedented promotional blitz. Just everywhere.
And her power came from turning her personal brand into this tool for, like, cultural empowerment, didn't it?
Exactly. Take her book club. It became this national sensation, capable of turning unknown authors into instant bestsellers overnight, basically driving the national conversation about reading.
And that happened despite significant internal doubts, right?
Huge doubts.
Yeah.
There's this great anecdote in the sources. Alice McGee, who initially suggested the book club idea, apparently worried internally that it would totally bomb in the ratings.
Yeah.
She anticipated horrible numbers for a literary segment on daytime TV.
But Oprah pushed ahead.
She did. And later, she actually framed that internal memo expressing doubt as a kind of trophy, using that internal skepticism to validate her own cultural intuition and the sheer power of her brand to shape national habits. It became part of the legend.
Okay, so persona can build empires, but it can also be used to hide things, right? Extreme wealth and power can construct a facade that deliberately conceals massive ethical failure.
For sure. Look at Robert Maxwell. The sources described him as an impulsive juggler and entrepreneur who projected this image of having a master plan. It was entirely non-existent, smoke and mirrors.
And he used his sheer force of personality, his position, to enforce financial deception.
Absolutely. The sources detail how he bullied his own accountants into recording disputed profits, things that weren't real. The power dynamic was just incredibly coercive.
There's that quote from an employee.
Yeah. I think there is a limit how far one can argue when one is an employee. It perfectly captures how Maxwell leveraged his unchecked authority to basically compel subordinates into helping him commit colossal financial fraud.
And we see that kind of tyrannical control over internal dissent even in the modern startup world, which often talks about openness and flat structures.
Right. Think about Theranos. It was characterized, according to the sources, by extremely. The former employee who eventually blew the whistle, Tyler Schultz, was described as being a nervous wreck after starting to communicate with the reporter, John Carey-Rue. It just shows the immense psychological pressure, the toll, of confronting that kind of highly centralized controlling authority.
And finally, maybe the ultimate advantage of extreme wealth and power is the ability to buy special privileges, sometimes even within the justice system itself.
Yeah, the Jeffrey Epstein case is a stark example mentioned in the sources. Despite a conviction for what was framed as a low-level felony in Florida,
He got special treatment.
his extreme wealth clearly helped secure favors that are just unthinkable for an average person. His attorneys managed to leverage his status to quickly secure work release following his conviction.
Work release for that kind of charge.
It underscores this profound structural reality, doesn't it? Power bends the rules. Extreme concentration of capital means the judicial process itself can potentially be manipulated or navigated differently to serve the interests of the powerful, even when they're facing criminal conviction. Hashtag outro.
Okay, so looking back across all these figures, these different eras, the competitive drive, that obsessive need for control over the factory floor, the balance sheet, the user experience, and this total command over the personal narrative, Those feel like the common threads that really bind them together.
I think that's right. It's clear that success, at this scale across centuries, it isn't just driven by innovation, is it? It's driven by intense control over externalities,
Yeah.
whether that's labor costs, user experience, financial structure, or the personal story you tell the world. That ruthless pursuit of leverage, it's just constant.
And as we talked about with Piketty, because of those underlying dynamics, like through PagerU, the nature of capital compounding, the rewards for achieving this obsessive control, they aren't linear. They're often arbitrary and exponential, which just reinforces the dominance of the few who manage to achieve that initial accumulation and control.
We've definitely explored how these tycoons leverage personal reputation. From Rockefeller's self-proclaimed piety and Ford's homespun hero image, all the way to Oprah's cultural empowerment and Musk's reality-bending visionary thing.
Which really raises an important final question, maybe something for you, the listener, to think about. We've seen how critical the art of self-construction and image control often is, maybe the final mechanism of dominance. So given the intense 247 public scrutiny facing today's powerful tech figures, where, a single viral moment, one bad tweet can move markets or spark a global scandal, is it even possible anymore? Can anyone build a truly world-dominating company today without first perfecting the art of being a captivating, maybe reality-bending, and certainly intensely managed public personality?